Ask a question.
I try not to.
David Shweki is
So if
fully
Yitzhak,
authorized.
if Yitzhak wants to bless Esav, he thinking that the Jews are not going to do the job in this world. Jews don't have Yaakov doesn't have the power to do what it needs to be done in this world.
Well, who knows who would have been the Jews, right? That's part of it.
He was also, he could have been,
Sure.
We know what happened, but what would have happened, it's a good question, right?
If he would have worked with Yaakov?
I mean, here,
If he would have
Yitzchak was focusing on Esav in order to refine him. And therefore he was hoping with the blessing he'll be able to accomplish it. But Chassidus says, Ach bazeh to Yitzchak. It's a very, very unusual expression. You won't find it in Chassidus. That in this there was an error. That Yitzchak figured that he's blessing Esav because he won't accomplish anything. It would have been either or.
but he's thinking that Tikkun is not going to fix the world.
Yes, so for example, in Chassidus it explains that that's why Yaakov needed a bracha for the tohu part of him even.
Right.
And he had to be a bracha in the earth, not just in his beruchnius.
Right.
Because Yaakov needed tohu also.
Right.
So the answer isn't that tikkun won out over tohu, but rather it's tikkun with the koch of tohu. But and that's why, and I think it's in Torah, or if I'm not mistaken, when Yaakov in the next parsha, V'yishlach Yaakov Melachim, is he's sending him a message. It's based on the Ari, but the Alter Rebbe has a very nice explanation. He's sending him a message. He's saying, "Banu el achich." Well, he first says, "In Lavan Garti, I lived with Lavan, and I was there until now." He's basically saying in the Chazal, the Rashi quotes the Taryag Mitzvah Shamarti. I kept the 613. Why is he telling him this? Just to brag. What he's telling him is I did my part in Olam HaTikkun, and he thought maybe he knew that Yaakov, that Esav had this high neshama. He thought maybe he fixed his chelik in Olam HaTohu, and now we come together. Mashiach will come. So it's not like just the simple story. One of them is, tzaddik, and the other one is a rasha. That over simple. That covers over all these layers that Kabbalah talks about rectifying tohu and tikkun, getting them back together.
In fact, we're talking about Teda Eir. There are certain neshamas that they come from Elam HaTeil. One of them, it says Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why he was kvad peh, he was speech impaired.
What's Tohu? You got to explain.
Tohu is the world of chaos.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That is, he was speech impaired. That's why he was speech impaired, because there were no vessels to express it in speech. And the second one is Chanoich. Chanoich was one that lived in the earlier generations, and it says Vayishalech Chanoich Esalikim Veinenu Kilokachesei. He was from a higher world. This is based on Kabbalah. So it also includes some neshamas from that world that lived in this world, but they were living on different standards, on completely different ideals. What Elam HaTeir represented. In general, when we speak about Teyu and Tikkun, there's also something, actually, it's reflected in the everyday routine behavior of a person. When a person gets up in the morning, they connect to the Almighty, they say a prayer. The word prayer in Hebrew means tefillah. The word tefillah comes also from the word hateifa kleicheres, gluing
Naftali.
Together. Naftali.
That's my
The
name.
Inyan Naftali alikim niftalti. So Rashi says nischabarti. Nischabarti means connected, attached, glued together. Tefillah is connecting one with the Almighty. And there's a ladder, it says in the Zohar, that tefillah is compared to a ladder that's coming up, and usually a ladder, as the Gemara tells us in the Talmud, this ladder is not less than 4 steps. And the 4 steps are basically the 4 sections of davening. You have the morning prayer, you have the first section that speaks about the greatness of Hashem, all the different praises. Then you have the blessings before the Shema. Then you have the Shema. Then you have the Shemoneh Esrei, the silent prayer, which is when you're standing right in front of the king. You can't signal, you can't motion, you can't speak nothing. Then comes the rest of the davening, the conclusion of the davening. These are 4 different worlds. And a person after davening lands, they come back down. And what do? They sit down and learn. The code of the Jewish law teaches us that after comes Mebeis HaKnesses, Lebeis HaMedrash. After a person prays, so that's when he goes into the Beis HaMedrash to study. And this is the study, hall of study. He studies Torah. He's studying the wisdom of Hashem. Torah is the wisdom and the will, the wisdom and will of Hashem. This is basically in learning. What do we do then? We are drawing down in our human mind the wisdom of Hashem, which is in Torah. So therefore, basically, this is called a shuv. This is called a settling down back after the rotzi, after the yearning. So every day, in a very miniature format, it takes place. You have teyu and you have tikkun. You have the world, the rotzi, like Nachsheh, like Nadav Avihu, that they had a yearning, as the Rachaim HaKodesh says, they had a yearning to connect to higher, and because they had that yearning, so they expired, they pushed it in the neshamas, their souls left their bodies. On the other hand, there is the idea of Torah, which is a person has to come down in vessels. Interestingly, how the Mittel Rebbe writes many times that when we come to the Shema, it says Shema, then it says Vahavta. A person has a yearning of love to Hashem, to cling to Hashem. And then it says, don't forget V'hoyu Hadvarim Ha'ela. Bring it down into vessels. Bring it down to words of study, Vishanamtim Uvanecha, and then to practical commandments. This is where it settles back down. As the Mittel Rebbe would say, the expression B'kelim Mekelim Sheinim, in vessels and an assortment of vessels, which is an expression in the Megillah, the Scroll of Esther. But it's basically bringing down something that whatever a person attains shouldn't just be left hanging there, but has to come down in a practical sense and reflect it throughout the day.
We don't have that much time, but I think in the last few minutes we'll just talk about, hopefully this is all very practical, and we know how to apply it, but we're just going to try to bring it all the way down, and give maybe some examples of how this can affect your life, how you can, for example, there's a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, where the Baal Shem Tov says that a man should not be with his sister because it's a chesed. Chesed means a kindness. So I'm sure in Yeshiva University they're explaining that that's not exactly a kindness, it's something, it's something in that context it means something inappropriate. But the Baal Shem Tov says the following thing. The Baal Shem Tov says that even if a man, or a woman for that matter, has an impulse, has a desire that's against the Torah, but it's a desire of love, and it's forbidden by the Torah, the person shouldn't just say, I'm a shmo, I have a desire against the Torah, and that's it, and I'll just fight against the desire, and that's all I have to do. But rather what the person should say is they should say that this particular person is forbidden to me, so I won't be with them. But the desire, I have to understand that the root of desire is ultimately because Hashem puts desire in the world, and then I have to take that as Irene, are you still there? She's not. You bring it back up, and you bring that desire towards the source of all sources. So the Baal Shem Tov would say, if you see somebody of great beauty, and you desire them, but you can't have them, it's not for you. So instead, say, the source of life, how much more beautiful is the source of life? It's God. So in a sense, Tohu,
The Rambam mentions that also.
the Rambam says you should love God the way a man loves a woman, that he can't sleep, he's so in love with her he can't eat, he's always thinking about her. So that's the way that we can learn from human love how to love God. But I think Olam Tohu gives us more permission, first of all, to recognize that the broken parts of ourselves have a root in Olam Tohu, but it isn't just to pat ourselves in the back and say, I'm crazy, and so is Tohu. So it's to take that energy to try to guide it and bring it to that place so that I can use the very thing that I'm fighting against and make it be on my side. Under this careful way, I use the power of Tohu. I have to bring it into the vessels of Tikkun.
How does a non-Jew do this? I mean, we have all the tools. The Jews have all the tools. Obviously, a lot of Jews are not doing it, but I know there's like yoga in the world, there's meditation. But the non-Jews can do this too. They can control their animal soul.
Well,
Redirect.
This is for another conversation, but I think Rabbi Ashlag talks about this idea, the contradictions or issues between chosenness and humanity, because he brings up a good point. He says if we just really think we're chosen, that's a very arrogant and kind of, almost infantile view of the world. If we just have a simple belief that we're simply chosen, what Rabbi Ashlag is kind of aiming towards is that we have a responsibility. Everybody says, okay, we're not really chosen just to be chosen, but we have a tafkid, we have a purpose, a specific responsibility. But he goes a little bit further than that. He says the goal is for all of humanity, but it starts with a specific people. And you see that in the Rambam, where the Rambam says that through Judaism, even though Judaism doesn't agree with Christianity and Islam in their details, but the idea that through Judaism gave rise to Christianity and Islam brings to messianic consciousness, to the betterment of the world. So there is some, again, it's more, I'm not giving it full explanation, but the answer is that the tools that the Torah gives us is ultimately something that can begin to affect the world at large. To be a light to the nations can have some effect on the world. So non-Jews as well as Jews in their respective pathways have the ability to work on their tohu. We have our way, and we share some of our ways with the world. I don't know if Rabbi Zelickson is. You could respond to that question.
I mean, on one hand, everybody was created in the image of the Almighty, Tzelem Elokim, and then there are certain things that what Teda gave the Jewish nation, what Teda gave, that the refinement, the standards that the Jewish nation has that other nations don't have. Other nations have the 7 commandments, and that's basically what's expected from them. On the other hand, every one of these commandments is, a person doesn't do it. It was it's mentioned in our sages. It's basically a very harsh punishment. It's not just a certain prohibition that was transgressed, but basically because it is a 7-point connection that they have with the Almighty, therefore the punishment by not doing it is also a very harsh punishment, because they are severing their connection and with the source of their existence.
We have many more ways of
we have more strings.
Yeah.
It's an example of 613 strings, the 613 commandments. So it's basically, it's interesting, our sages tell us that because the Almighty wanted to give us merit to the Jewish nation, therefore He gave us so many commandments. So the question is, He gave us more work because He liked us so much that He gave us more work. So one of the answers that's given, the Rebbe mentions it quite often, is that one of the explanations is that because Ratzak, or He wanted to refine us, so therefore He gave us so many mitzvahs that everyone should be able to pick something that's their favorite commandment. The same way that the Talmud says, for example, when one sage asked the other, your father, what was he more careful with? So he observed all the commandments that he was able to observe, but still there was something that he was more careful with. So Chassidus explains, Zohir, careful means also shining. What was the special commandment which was the channel through which all other commandments by him elevated? So this is basically Ratzak HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that He wanted to refine the Jewish nation, so He gave also that a person should have a certain gishmak, a certain pleasure in doing something, the same way that when it comes to learning. When it comes to learning, the father says one thing, the child says another.